and one of Hollywood's most familiar faces, Roddy McDowall.
At just 34 years old, Roddy McDowall did something unthinkable. He walked into a Los Angeles bank with a locked box, and inside were dozens of love letters. Not just any letters, but passionate words exchanged with powerful Hollywood men. He hid them there, fearing exposure, blackmail, and the destruction of everything he had built. These weren't props or playful scribbles. They were evidence of forbidden love in an unforgiving era. And by sealing them away, Roddy wasn't just protecting himself. He was protecting a whole network of stars who lived in fear every single day. But how did a boy from South London become the man guarding Hollywood's most dangerous secrets? To answer that, we need to go back to the very beginning. Roddy McDowall was born Roderick Andrew Anthony Jude McDowall in Herne Hill, South London, on September 17, 1928. His father, Thomas McDowall, was a merchant seaman of Scottish descent. His mother, Winifred Corcoran, was an Irish-born aspiring actress whose passion for the stage filled the household with dreams larger than their modest circumstances. London in the 1930s was a city of sharp contrasts, with glamorous West End theaters and grim streets still scarred by the Great War. For Roddy, it was a place of imagination, but also of looming shadows. As a boy, Roddy was strikingly photogenic. His deep-set eyes carried both innocence and intensity, and his mother quickly recognized his potential. She entered him in modeling shoots and small roles. By the age of 10, his face was appearing in British films. A child whose delicate look stood out in an era when cinema was defined by bold voices and adult dramas. He acted in pictures like Murder in the Family, 1938, and Scruffy, 1938. Small roles that hinted at his natural presence. Yet the world around him was shifting. Radio broadcasts carried warnings of war, air raid drills became part of daily life, and the glitter of cinema felt increasingly fragile. When the Second World War erupted in 1939, the McDowalls, like many families, faced upheaval. London was battered by bombings. Streets turned dark each night under blackout curtains. Winifred made the difficult decision to protect her children by relocating. In 1940, she brought Roddy and his sister Virginia across the Atlantic, joining the wave of evacuees escaping the Blitz. They landed in America, first in New York, then Los Angeles, the city of dreams that seemed untouched by the war raging in Europe. For a 12-year-old boy with an English accent, Hollywood was an alien planet. American children teased him for his voice, yet the studios saw opportunity. This was the moment when British war refugees were being cast in sympathetic roles, the perfect blend of pathos and charm for audiences hungry for escape. Roddy was suddenly in demand. What began as survival soon became destiny. The young boy who once roamed London streets now found himself under California sunshine, with a chance to reinvent himself entirely. Roddy's arrival in Hollywood coincided with America's wartime appetite for stories of courage and innocence. MGM, Fox, and Warner Brothers were all scouting for fresh young talent. With his cherubic face and cultivated manners, Roddy fit the mold perfectly. In 1941, he landed his breakthrough in How Green Was My Valley, John Ford's sweeping Welsh mining family drama. The film won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and though Roddy was still just a boy, his performance as Hugh Morgan captured critics' hearts. Suddenly, the boy from South London was not just a refugee, he was a rising star. By the mid-1940s, Roddy was working steadily. He appeared in My Friend Flicka, 1943, where he played the sensitive boy yearning for a horse of his own. And in Lassie films such as Lassie Come Home, 1943, where his gentle rapport with Elizabeth Taylor sparked one of Hollywood's longest friendships. The pair grew inseparable, bound by the knowledge that both were child stars molded by studios, pressured to smile even when the cameras were gone. Audiences adored Roddy's sincerity, his wide eyes, his unforced emotion. To many, he represented the very picture of wartime innocence. Yet the transition from child to adult roles was treacherous. Hollywood was littered with discarded child stars, adored for a few fleeting years then forgotten. Roddy, however, proved different. He studied his craft seriously, determined to survive the transition. By the late 1940s, he began taking stage work, honing his technique. On Broadway, he appeared in plays such as Misalliance and No Time for Sergeants, earning respect that many former child stars never achieved. This decision to focus on acting over image would sustain him for decades. Still, the Hollywood system was suffocating. Studios dictated haircuts, mannerisms, even who young actors could be seen with in public. Gossip magazines thrived on speculation, and every smile with a co-star was spun into a romance. Roddy, quiet by nature, felt the pressure to conform. He was admired for his gentleness, but insiders whispered that he was different. In an industry that prized rigid masculinity, difference was dangerous. By the early 1960s, Roddy found a new identity on screen. His role as Octavian in Cleopatra, 1963, opposite Elizabeth Taylor, and Richard Burton showed his ability to hold his own against giants. Later, his turn in Planet of the Apes, 1968, as Cornelius transformed him into a pop culture icon, proving he could disappear into roles with depth and dignity. He was no longer just a child star grown up. He was a working actor with staying power. But behind the applause, behind the masks and makeup, Roddy carried a burden that could never be spoken aloud. Hollywood had strict morality clauses, and whispers about his private life could end his career overnight. The young refugee who had once been saved by Hollywood now found himself trapped by it. Hollywood in the mid-20th century was a glittering city of illusions. On screen, romance was painted in bold strokes. Off-screen, secrecy was a matter of survival. For Roddy McDowall, life became a careful dance between genuine affection and the ever-present threat of exposure. Friends later recalled that Roddy never flaunted his private life, but those who knew him well understood he carried a heart full of secret attachments. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Hollywood was governed by the Hays Code and an unspoken rulebook enforced by gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons. Studio bosses crafted elaborate publicity romances to protect their investments. Young men like Roddy, who did not fit the rigid mold, learned quickly that discretion was the only armor. Yet within closed doors, there existed a hidden network of parties, rented beach houses, and weekend retreats where stars could breathe without masks. Roddy moved in circles that included fellow actors wrestling with similar secrets. Elizabeth Taylor, his dearest friend, often shielded him, arranging safe gatherings where he could meet others without prying eyes. He reportedly shared moments of closeness with rising talents, men whose names would one day command marquees. Biographers have pointed to his bond with Montgomery Clift, another sensitive soul navigating Hollywood's relentless glare. Others whispered of encounters with actors like Sal Mineo and Tab Hunter, whose own stories of secrecy and betrayal would one day echo his. Whether fleeting romances or enduring friendships, these connections offered Roddy both companionship and the reassurance that he was not alone. Yet secrecy was never without cost. To protect himself, Roddy became meticulous. He kept love letters in a bank vault, fearing blackmail in an industry where scandals could be weaponized. The very existence of those letters reveals the duality of his world, a man whose profession demanded he bare his soul, yet whose private truths had to be locked away in darkness. Each page was a confession that could never see daylight. There were trips abroad where Roddy found more freedom. In Europe, away from Hollywood's tight grip, he allowed himself moments of candor. Biographers note that during filming in Italy and France, he mingled more openly with companions, savoring anonymity among foreign crowds. Still, he returned to Los Angeles each time, back to the scrutiny of studios and the suffocating silence of public life. At gatherings in Malibu, at quiet dinners in Beverly Hills, or on late-night drives along the Pacific Coast Highway, Roddy and others like him carved out fragments of authenticity. These fragments sustained him, even as he learned to smile for photographers and pose beside women chosen by the studio. Love was real, but it could never be free. The secrecy carried tension. Every knock on the door, every phone call, could be a threat. In a time when careers were ruined by mere rumor, Roddy's discretion became his lifeline. But as the 60s gave way to the 70s, the walls began to tremble. The world outside was changing, but inside, Hollywood, silence still reigned. And soon, Roddy would face a crisis that proved how fragile his carefully guarded world truly was. For years, Roddy McDowall lived with secrets locked behind smiles and vault doors. But Hollywood had a way of prying open even the most carefully hidden corners. In 1974, his private world came crashing dangerously close to public scandal. The FBI raided his home, seizing hundreds of film reels he had collected. Officially, the case was about copyright violations, yet whispers quickly swirled that they were searching for something else. The specter of hidden letters, photographs, or evidence of forbidden liaisons lingered in the air. To those who knew Roddy's habits, the fear was real. Exposure was only a headline away. The raid left him shaken. For a man who had spent decades cultivating discretion, the sight of agents rifling through his belongings felt like a violation beyond repair. Though the charges fizzled and the reels were eventually returned, the incident deepened Roddy's instinct for caution. Friends noted how guarded he became afterward, how often he withdrew behind charm and wit when questions cut too close. Hollywood could forgive eccentricities, but rumors about sexuality in the 1,970 seconds still carried the power to end contracts overnight. This wasn't the only pressure. As the studio system collapsed and the industry shifted, roles grew scarcer. Roddy, once the adored boy of How Green Was My Valley, and later the thoughtful Cornelius of Planet of the Apes, now faced the brutal reality of middle age in a youth-obsessed business. Producers whispered he was too refined, too unusual, not the rugged leading man audiences demanded. Scripts that once might have been his slipped to other hands. For an actor who had worked tirelessly since childhood, rejection cut deeply. Loneliness crept in. Surrounded by friends but often unable to reveal the full truth of himself, Roddy battled periods of quiet despair. He turned increasingly to photography, finding solace behind the camera when the spotlight grew harsh. His portraits of stars like Elizabeth Taylor and Katharine Hepburn revealed an intimacy he rarely allowed in his own life. Yet even those photos, exquisite as they were, carried the echo of distance. He was always the observer, rarely the one fully seen. The emotional toll was profound. In private, Roddy confided to close companions the exhaustion of living two lives. The boy who had once fled wartime London now felt besieged by another kind of war, one waged against authenticity. And while he never broke publicly, those who loved him could see the strain. His humor sparkled at parties, but behind it lingered a sadness that never quite faded. By the end of the 1,970 seconds, Roddy had reached a low point. Hollywood's appetite for him had diminished. Whispers about his private life grew louder, and the world he had built on careful secrecy seemed more fragile than ever. It was a moment when even he wondered if the fight to remain hidden was worth the cost. In the 1,980 seconds, as Hollywood reinvented itself with blockbuster franchises and emerging stars, Roddy McDowall quietly reshaped his own career. He leaned into television, voice work, and character roles, crafting a second act that allowed him to thrive outside the crushing expectations of leading man stardom. His distinctive voice became a fixture in animated series. From The Legend of Prince Valiant to Batman, the animated series, where younger generations came to know him without realizing the breadth of his legacy. Photography, once a refuge, blossomed into a celebrated art form under his name. Exhibitions of his portraits traveled, and stars who trusted no one else let Roddy capture them in vulnerable moments. His books of photographs, often filled with candid images of Elizabeth Taylor, Katharine Hepburn, and countless others, became cultural artifacts. Behind the lens, Roddy found freedom. He could express intimacy without risking exposure. Personally, Roddy created what friends called a chosen family. He hosted dinners where old stars and rising actors mingled, finding in his home a rare safe space. Younger performers, uncertain of their own paths, found in him a mentor who listened without judgment. Instead, he offered kindness, perhaps remembering his own early days in a strange land where acceptance was scarce. The world around him was changing too. By the late 1,980 seconds, and 1,990 seconds, conversations about sexuality began to shift. The AIDS crisis had ravaged Hollywood, silencing many of his contemporaries. Rock Hudson's death in 1985 forced the industry to confront truths it had long denied. Roddy, though still private, quietly supported friends and charities. He did not stand on soapboxes, but he gave what he could, offering dignity to those cast aside. It was his way of easing the burden that once crushed him. In his final years, Roddy battled illness, but never withdrew from the people he loved. He remained warm, generous with his time, and endlessly curious about art and film. When he passed in 1998 at the age of 69, tributes poured in from every corner of the industry. Actors spoke not just of his talent, but of his loyalty, his humor, and the quiet sanctuary he offered in a world that often demanded masks. Looking back, Roddy seemed to embody resilience. He had carried secrets that might have destroyed him, yet he managed to carve out joy, friendship, and lasting artistry. The boy from London who once fled bombs and blackouts left behind not just films and photographs, but a legacy of compassion. He showed that even in silence, one could live with grace. Roddy McDowall's story is not just about survival in Hollywood. It is about the cost of silence, the fragility of image, and the quiet courage of a man who lived between shadows and light. He kept his love letters in a bank vault, symbols of a heart that longed to be free, but feared destruction if exposed. Those hidden pages remind us of an entire generation of stars forced to protect their truth with secrecy. Yet his life was not defined by fear alone. Roddy gave us performances that still resonate, photographs that reveal the soul of Hollywood's greatest icons, and friendships that endured across decades. He was proof that kindness could flourish even under pressure, that art could outlive the constraints of prejudice. His resilience carried him from bomb shelters in London to the bright lights of Los Angeles, from child star to beloved elder statesman of the screen. When we look back at his journey, we are reminded that fame often demands masks, but humanity lies in the moments when those masks slip. Roddy lived those moments quietly, leaving behind a legacy that speaks not through scandal, but through sincerity. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Which of Roddy's roles or photographs do you remember most? And if you want to hear more hidden histories of Hollywood, subscribe and stay with us for the journeys yet to come. These stories matter, because they remind us of the price of love, the weight of silence, and the timeless courage to keep going.